if I just make sure that I'm really driving through the heel, it just makes my glutes so strong. And in the past, I've actually tried squatting like in the real gym with real weight, and it just gave me a sensation way different, more of a quad burning. I'd go out the next day and I'd be like, oh my God, like my legs are smashed.
All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today we want to talk about strength training. The three of us have very different roads to strength training. Some never believed that we should strength train. I was definitely in that camp in the beginning. End of the day, does strength training make us faster, a better cyclist? What actually is a better cyclist? We get into that. But I'm Brendan Hausler, Landry Bobo, Keegan Swerble. Keegan, let's start with you, man, because give us the history. You're newest to strength training. For those I'm sure that are following you on your YouTube, on your Instagram, have seen you start doing lifting, we'll just call it. But where you yeah, if you haven't seen the photos and some of the things he's lifting, what he's adding his weights, they're not plates. We'll just say that. Um, why did you never strength train? And then bring us up to today.
So yeah, this is I actually did try the whole strength training thing a couple of years ago for the first time. That was 2022-23 winter. And it's like this is one of those things that I look back at my Training Peaks comments and I'm just like, this is insane that how could you be that stupid? But anyway, I had a coach and we're kind of trying to do the strength training based off RPE. It's very difficult to kind of gauge where that right rep range is. I would just do these strength trainings and just be destroyed for 3-4 days after. Months and months of just like kind of hating both the strength training, hating my bike training because I felt horribly. Ended up leaving it after what, 3-4 months and never touched it again. Just kind of went back to my previous belief of thinking, I'm just not made for strength training, whatever. And then actually kind of talking with one of my buddies, Matteo Jorgensen, and he's kind of told me this last summer. He was kind of mentioning like, yeah, like their strength training is very, very minimal, but you just have to do it a year round. And so I was thinking like, all right, you know what? Even if I could do just one or two basic exercises that are gonna really kind of move the needle for me and just do it year round, and also obviously with the proper dosages, which is in our case very, very much less than we all think. So I kind of just started doing that back when I started training after my off season in October. And yeah, I do it try and do it twice a week, and it really, for me, it's a major one, major, major, major one. Also, thanks to Laundry who kind of helped guide me that in the start there a little bit with a couple of specific exercises that I feel really, really did move the needle for me.
What are
Yeah.
those exercises that move the needle?
Well, that's the good one. Is the one of them is I can do it right in my house because I do have about 50 kilos of weight with my Wahoo trainer and my bag of water bottles. It's the Bulgarian split squat, which is the one where you put your back leg up on a bench or a couch or whatever you're doing in your house, like and then you just do. I literally do is explosive on the concentric part, which is the upward phase of the lift. And I'll do like 3 by 5 reps, maybe 3 by 6. And it's heavy weight for me, like that 50 kilos. If I'm doing it one leg, it's a solid bit of weight. So I'm able to do it. That's kind of the only heavy real lift that I do. And then I kind of do more just, if you guys want to watch the video, you can see it on my YouTube. I don't get into it much, but it's kind of embarrassing. But
And then just so people hear it correctly, you worked up to that. I'm assuming the 50, you started just body weight and then some water
yeah.
bottles in a backpack and then holding onto a trainer.
And yeah, I did. And like I say, I'm a very weak person genetically. We were just talking about this before we started recording, but like, and I'm not explosive. Whenever I get really tired, like, the typical riders that when they're under a lot of fatigue, they still have that ability to just like sit in the saddle and just grind it out for 30, 40 seconds that they really need based off strength. I am the opposite. When I get to that level of fatigue, like I just have no strength left. And I've always really, really struggled with that. Before I was a cross country skier, I was very weak. I'm just weak. Like I don't know if it's my bone structure, how I am structured genetically. I'm a weak human. My sister is as well. We have the same kind of build. So yeah, I started very lightly. Obviously, that's a big one for anyone starting out. We don't want to get injured, but it's very easy to go too far with this stuff, as you guys well know.
So are you going to stick with that? And what are the other lifts that you're going to do? And what about any upper body?
Do no upper body,
Okay.
and
Because
I know like on a health level, obviously we got to balance it out. I am a full-time pro, and I'm specifically a climber on the road. So for us, and this is also a kind of other misconception that I'd like to talk about, like this whole gaining muscle thing. Like if you're riding your bike a lot, it's ridiculously hard to get muscle. Like ridiculously hard to get muscle. So I wouldn't be so much worried about that. It's more of just laziness, I would say, that I'm not doing any upper body.
yeah, can we convince you to maybe try some like bent over rows and watch you be more of a beast climbing?
Possibly, possibly, but and this is kind of another tangent for me. When I'm training heavy on the bike, and when like now my season's about to start, I'm getting into this time where I'm doing more traveling. I don't want it to be too much of a mental burden for me to have to do this weight work. So that's why my routine is able to work for me now, because it literally takes me 20 minutes. I have to do That's why I prefer to do it at my house. Because if I have to go to the gym for certain weight machines to do certain exercises, I just know that it's too much for me to be able to commit to that. Say, I'm going to do this for the next entire year, at least once a week.
Can we get you to pick up the trainer with both arms? So if it's 50 kgs and just do this
Yeah,
10 times
yeah,
and then do that 3 times and let's continually weigh yourself to prove that you are not going to gain any weight from this. But I shouldn't guarantee. I'm pretty confident that just the muscle and the little bit of strain from that, you will over 4 weeks be like, dude, my arms feel different, and then you'll like start noticing on the bike, and it's yeah, I'm just so convinced by that. Like and I think especially if you're yeah, I get it as a climber, don't want more weight. I just don't think you're gonna gain more weight, and those little like bird arms are going to be able to actually like torque just a little bit more when you're climbing, and when that acceleration happens, and it's just that this like we're in well, I shouldn't say you're in the game of micro advantages and percentages. That could be
yeah.
one that is and it's yeah, I don't want you to add more time to your like life and got to go to this gym and I hate this and this sucks now, but like there's always something heavy that you can just row and something to think of. Not trying to put you on the spot, but
Oh, and I definitely agree. And like I actually listened to the podcast you did with Will Barta today, and just kind of he was meant, yeah, like cycling's changed so much. It's like these guys that are at the top, be it classics rider, sprinter, even the climbers, they're more like just well balanced all around athletes. There's this stick figure man, it doesn't exist. And I don't know. I mean, that said, you look at Jonas Vingegaard and his I've like been right near this guy. It's mind blowing, his physique. It truly looks like he was like genetically made. His arms, they could not be skinnier. It's unbelievable. But then you look at his legs, his calves, his quads, and they're like muscly like a sprinter. It's really, really insane. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much upper body those guys are doing, to be honest, either. But it's definitely something to think about. No doubt about it.
yeah, I would say probably not. But I think that is a lot of stereotype. I mean, I had a guy who asked me not to mention. Yeah, I have one. there was a world tour guy that reached out and we were talking on Instagram only, and strength training came up, and it was just the weight thing. And I challenged him. I said, listen, man, I realize we're chatting on IG, but just try it. Like, what's the worst that happens? You start to, it's not like you're going to gain 5 pounds. You start to notice like a little bit of bulk, and you weigh yourself, you're like, oh, I've got another pound. This is weird. I mean, I just think like everyone thinks it's going to, like, they're going to blow up like Schwarzenegger, not be able to stop it. Like, I've started lifting, it's over. Like, just be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm not going to lift stuff. And the explosiveness aspect, if you're truly, if it's an athlete that's like, hey, I'm only ever in contention when it's a 30-40 minute climb, and even then there's a sprint at the end, there's a full gas effort at the end. I shouldn't say anyone, but so many athletes I talk to that turn into proponents of strength training, they come back when we talk about like a 2-minute KOM or a sprint finish. They're like, dude, the arms, oh my God. Artem Schmidt, he was one of the first people that brought it up on the podcast, who's now on Ineos. And he was like, man, I see people not doing arms. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And yeah, so I don't know. I would challenge anybody who thinks they're going to gain too much weight, even if they're a pro climber. There's a lot of benefit to it.
It's something to throw around, to be honest. Yeah,
we got you thinking about it. That's good. Before we shift it over to Landry, who's got a ton of experience strength training and from the educational side of his degree, plural. What else, when you talk about year round and you're traveling a lot for racing, stick to the 2 strength workouts as much as possible. What do you think has changed from when you tried this the first time, though? What's different? Can you pick anything out? Were you maybe lifting too much before, or too many reps, or too much weight?
weight, yeah, too much everything, as I always do. Too much, like,
Okay.
and I mean, this. I want to say that you mentioned this in multiple other podcasts, but like, you don't have to be exiting the gym after a session feeling like smashed. Like, this is why actually I've honestly gotten to the point now where I always do my gym session before my training. And geez, the other day I did it literally before, like, I went out, was like smashing some threshold intervals, meaning, and yeah, I did feel it a little bit, but I was still able to ride at 400, and like more than 400 at times. So like, I wasn't that dead. And so it's almost gotten to the point now where it's more so of just like an activation. Like, I do so few that it's just an activation. And I've kind of I've figured out that if I'm doing it twice a week, and like I say, I'm literally of my one heavy lift, and I do a couple of other little kind of more so just activation thing with less weight. Like, I'll do my squats with my 55 kilos, which is not really a heavy weight lift, right? But just kind of for rebalancing my body a little, a couple different middle motions. But the one heavy lift that I do is now just like an activation. And I feel great. Like, you've mentioned that many times. Like, I do this and I go out in the bike and my muscles are all engaged. They're all opened up and turned on. Just feels like the pedals are just pedaling themselves. So I'm really doing a lot less. Back in the time when I did it before, I'd be walking back. I was doing it at the gym, so I'd have to get to the gym and all this stuff and be walking back and go, oh my God, this is going to be a painful bike ride afternoon. So way less, way, 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 way less.
I think let's highlight that for me, and maybe other people disagree. If I leave feeling wrecked, it's too much. I love to lift beforehand, and it should be an energized feeling. Yeah, you just, and I'm even talking if people are deadlifting a lot or doing heavier squats, you feel it, but there is a difference. And it does take some experience in lifting of knowing. I mean, I used to overlift so much I could barely pedal zone 2. I'm talking low zone 2 is like, ooh, this is really hard. Just overcooked myself. Now, would that be good if strength was my sport? Sure, but this is okay. Make the gains to make more watts, but don't kill myself. And I think the one caveat that people might find if they really start getting into it is if I'm trying to do like 4x15s or 2x20s or something long, I would definitely notice higher RPE towards the end. I could usually eke it out, but it definitely was like, okay, I maybe lifted a little bit too much, or maybe it's just this is not the day. But if I have like 3-minute efforts, let's go deadlift, and that's when I set PRs. I've joked with people, should we be doing rack pulls before a bike race? I think no, because of the fatigue later. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the maximal watts are. It matters who's really good at hour 3.5 for us amateurs not doing really long races. Or if you're in gravel, you're doing a 6-hour race. But yeah, so I don't know if rack pulls are the answer, but the activation that you said, that's
Yeah.
mega. That's necessary.
That said, like these guys that do like my best buddy is a track sprinter on the bike, and like they will get in the gym and pound out some heavy lifts right before the race.
That's where I took
Wild.
rack. I took him from Ashton Lambie. He does rack pulls, I think, before he set the world record, if I remember the podcast correctly. So it's like kind of crazy.
Yeah. Makes sense. It does make sense. Yeah.
LB, strength training. What got you in? Have you always been strength training? Give a quick history up and then up to now.
So when I started riding back in 2011, it was still very much the belief that you shouldn't be strength training. I remember one of my early mentors, if you want to call him, told me a story when he tried strength training in the winter, and he's like, "Oh, I built 20 pounds of muscle and like it ruined my entire season. Like never strength train. Like it's just gonna ruin you like forever." So I never touched a weight for my first 6 years of riding, I think. And I was at that age, I guess I would have been almost 20 years old. I was like a piece of spaghetti. Like Keegan, I remember Keegan, he was at this Air Force race and he came up to me and he's like ridiculously skinny. And I remember him just like looking at me, he's just like, "God, you're skinny, Landry." I was just like,
You were way skinnier than you were way skinnier than I've ever been by
oh,
miles.
it was scary. It was scary. Yeah. And anyways, that was me back then. And then what happened is this was my first Pro 1-2 race. It was at the end of the season that same year, and I just got destroyed. And I was like doing some critical thinking, and I realized that like everybody that beat me was like a strong, full-grown man, and I was like, huh, maybe I shouldn't be like starving myself all the time like an idiot and trying to be super obsessive about weight, because that's just what I was from an early, like from right when I started cycling, that's just what I thought. And then you go on Instagram and Chris Froome's eating avocados and broccoli, and then it's like, oh, mindset was very different back then. So I,
As a joke, just so no one thinks that's actually true. That those were like joke posts that
yeah,
what's his name talked about in the podcast. Anyways, keep going. I don't want somebody to hear that and be like, wait a minute, Chris Froome's only eating avocados. I'm gonna do that. Don't do that.
yeah. At the time, as an impressionable teenager, I didn't think it was a joke, but so anyways, I hired a coach and he was really experienced, really good local racer, like even beat Chad Haga in a time trial one year. So I was like super stoked to work with him, and he got me in the gym, and that's kind of when I started. That had been not 8 or 9 years ago, and yeah, I've done it pretty much ever since then. And it's been a year-on-year thing, but I find every year I get a little bit stronger, and I've made a lot of the same mistakes that Keegan's made at times as well. Um, and I definitely agree with everything he said about just not doing too much. I think it can be so easy to get so fixated on just trying to get good at the lifting that it's like, well, you're doing this to help the cycling. So if it's hurting your cycling, like you're doing too much. And it's hard. It's always hard for us as cyclists to tell ourselves to back it down. But something is always better than nothing. But if you're going to do too much, then you're better off not doing it at all.
That's awesome. Ian Boswell was the name I was thinking of, who had mentioned that Froome was doing that as a joke. And Ian said in the podcast, I told him, man, you can't post that. People are going to follow what you do. So I think, and I don't think we want to, this probably isn't applicable to this podcast, but from the science standpoint, and I think we talked about this in another one. I mean, from the research you look at, Landry, is there anything that points to not strength training? I think everyone now kind of is hearing, okay, cycling's sort of behind a lot of other sports. Are we seeing a lot more research that you've come across pro strength training? Is there anybody still saying don't strength train? Where does that kind of sit in 2025?
I can't say I've ever seen research that says strength training is going to hurt your performance as long as you're doing it properly. But that's the big key. You have to do it properly. And that takes either like personal experience, or you just need to have somebody to put guardrails on your training and tell you what to do. Because if you mess it up, it can ruin your entire spring, which has happened to me before. So,
man, I will jump on that train, and that's, executing it. How do you execute it properly? I think someone can give you guardrails, guide rails, whatever we want to call it, but also you need to use your own intuition. The first strength training that I ever did back in 2010, I questioned, but I was too new in the sport to really question what I was doing. And the program had like 1 rep max, and I was trying to squat just ridiculous weight. It didn't feel right, and then I actually did. I like tweaked my back. It only took me out for a couple weeks, but it was pretty painful. And I would highly recommend going nowhere near that amount of weight, especially when you're first starting. And I became hyper obsessed with, as I got more experience with it, then it was, well, how much weight can I lift? And I sort of forgot that I was doing this for cycling. I enjoy the sport of strength training. So I think some of that, then it was, you know what? I don't really feel like doing these step ups that I know are good for me. I'm going to put all my energy into these big lifts. And if I'm lifting this much here, I don't need to do any secondary or tertiary lifts. Maybe I'm just going to also deadlift today. And then I just started trying to only do like big lifts. And I ignored all the small lifts that, if you listen to anyone way more experienced than me, says all the small lifts make your big lifts better. So try to avoid the obsession. I think it's fine to get excited about the gym and look forward to it. That's a great aspect of this, having another sport that you can engage in, but don't focus on just a couple lifts. And I would really say variety is the way. And that's another thing that I'm circling back on this year, especially as a master's athlete. I used to do more plyo stuff. I did not enjoy it though, because it just sort of, I was in the gym getting so hyped on bigger weights that then I had to shift, and I'm doing like box jumps and things that were way more aerobic, and I was like losing my breath. I'm like, I don't want to do this in here. I'm going to like go ride. I just think I'm not an athlete that lacks explosiveness versus my peers, but for just general health, I was watching a video and it was talking about sprinting, like running sprinting. I can't sprint. I can't go play basketball because all I do is ride and strength train. And so personally, I'm like, you know what? Addressing that, what I think is a personal weakness, is that going to make me slower? I'm going to doubt it. When I started hiking here and doing more stuff on my feet is when I've had some of my best 10-minute power, 12-minute power. And I would say just, to any athlete, especially masters athletes, like people think they've plateaued. There's usually a way to get faster at something. So yeah, that's my soapbox for try strength training. Don't get over obsessed about it. And, sometimes just take a step back and look at other options in the gym. And this is a good time to talk to your friends. Like, what are people doing? There's just so many ways to do it. Yeah. Oh, and my last thing is, how many times are people going to do it? Keegan kind of already answered this. He's going to keep going as much as possible through the season. Landry, what's your preseason versus in-season protocol? How many times a week? And then maybe more specifically, what are you going to change as the season starts? We're recording this February 5th. When does your season start this year?
Oh, for me, there's not that many races around here, so probably not till May. But
Okay. So
yeah,
you got some time.
yeah, I got time. But generally, I think for most people, I recommend for most people, 2 days a week, the whole base season, preseason and base season, of heavier lifting, really trying to build the strength. And then I've found what works really well is once you get into the season, 1 day per week in the gym, and then maybe a second day of just lighter weight, like activation. Because if you do say you go to the gym on Wednesday and you do your maintenance lift, then you can do maybe your activation session on Friday or Saturday. And I find that really helps to just kind of keep the muscles fired up.
Mm-hmm.
And also I find that it keeps you from getting too sore from the actual maintenance session. And it's something like super easy. You can just do it at home. So you can just do it with like body weight. So that works really well.
One thing I've been thinking about, Keegan, go ahead.
I have a question for laundry, because you mentioned this too, Brandon. When you guys say variation, are you recommending that people are basically just doing a different weight session every time they go in, or are we having, let's say our two principal heavy weights, and then the variation is added with these kind of smaller lifts on the side? That's what you mean by variation when you say that?
I don't, but Landry, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I think it's good to definitely have variation with your primary. I think it's good to have variation with all of your lifts, but if we're just specifically talking lower
Define that though. What does that variation mean?
variation, just like different exercises. So don't just do one different exercise. So for if we're talking specifically lower body, I think it's good to have one bilateral and one unilateral exercise if you can. So like squat and then Bulgarian split squat, which I had never really done the Bulgarian split squat until this past year, and it's been like total game changer, by the way. I used to not do it because I hated it, but I went last year. I visited at home for 3 weeks and I didn't have access to a gym, but I had dumbbells and I was like, okay, how can I make this more challenging? So I started doing Bulgarian split squats with just 25-pound dumbbells. And almost immediately, like I felt it on the bike and I was like, whoa, it's like a little bit extra power here. So I've really been working on that this winter. And yeah, worked up to like 130 pounds on the Bulgarian split squats. And it's crazy. I'm already noticing some really big benefits from that. So,
Each leg.
well, like, yeah, I use a barbell. So like one-legged, so I guess that's like 130 pounds. But
Yeah, each leg. Yeah, that's mega.
yeah, it's
How many do you do of those?
uh with that heavy, like 5 or 6 reps, like 3 sets.
That's like a 260 squat. I mean, I think even more like when you have only one leg and all the.
I can't squat anywhere near that much, partly because I've got really long femurs, which makes it hard biomechanically. But my squat is like 180. But
That's wild. You can do so much one legged.
yeah,
That's
I
a
think
lot.
to your question on variation, Keegan, and this is actually something I've been thinking a lot for myself is, oh man, I'm like, okay, how do I open this can of worms? Yes, variation to the main lift, something that I've lacked in doing. So my main lifts used to be a back squat, a deadlift, and then an overhead press. I never did a pull as a main lift. And I would do those as like 5 sets of 3 reps or maybe 5 by 5. The variation in that is so here's the difference. When Landry's talking about doing 2 days a week, I still sometimes do 3 days a week a lot of times, unless I'm racing or if I have races coming up. And so instead of an activation session, I might do a big lift on Tuesday, say a back squat. And then my main lift the second day might be a heavy single leg Romanian deadlift. So that's now like my deadlift, but it's only single legged and it's maybe, I think it's like a 50-pound I'll use. The other thing that I'm thinking of is instead of circling a big lift as back squat, deadlift, overhead press, as I start to tire or as I start to like, hey, I'm not really lifting more, which is not, I don't think is a problem. Sometimes I'm like, okay, but I'm lifting the same, but the RPE is lower. I might just to change it up, be like, now my heavy lift is like the rear foot elevated split squat, the Bulgarian split squat. Or maybe I'll say, you know what, I'm going to try and do some like heavier lateral stuff, lateral squats. If I've been working that up as a secondary and tertiary lift, I just think from every time I've stayed too structured, and when I say too structured, maybe a duration of like 6 months, I just get kind of like stale. I think I was lacking unilateral work. And again, this was like getting hyper obsessed with like big weights all the time. And so yeah, little bit of variation in what is the big lift, what is the rep scheme in lifts, and also the amount of weight for a big lift, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, like, don't overthink it, because I think we
yes.
kind of treat lifting a lot as cycling of just, I have to do this exactly this many watts this time, and then next week I'm going to do this, and like it just doesn't always work that way. And you can only lift however much your body can lift, and it could be frustrating if you're not seeing progressions, or you think you should be able to do this, or last week you did more than that, and it's just like, just get in the gym and just stay within your limits. And as long as you're lifting consistently in the gym, you're going to be getting all that you need, all the benefit that you need from it.
I
Yeah,
had a friend who said, you know what, man, the strongest I ever was, and he's more of a rock climber and beast mode. And he said, my strongest was when I just went in the gym and lifted heavy SHIT. And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I just let go of this. Like, I got to do all this exact structure. And he said, same. He's like, tell me this, is every endurance ride for you 250 watts? And I said, no. Sometimes it's 240. Sometimes it's 230. Sometimes it's 280. Like, it varies. He's like, exactly. You don't always know what you're bringing. And so you got to get in there and start lifting stuff. We warm up and you're like, this is PR day. I'm going big. And then other days you're like, I'm just going to lift a bunch of stuff. That's actually one thing which I think it can be volume in the gym. I don't know where true strength people sit on this. From a quick Google search, I think there's not a consensus, but like the Strong app that I use tracks how many pounds you lifted in a whole session. I think it's dangerous because you can start chasing that number, just as some people want to like chase TSS, let's say, or kilojoules. But it's kind of interesting to see how much you lift in a session versus other sessions, and is there any progression there? And maybe you just go in one day and you're like, okay, I don't have like mega lifts. Maybe I'm going to do like more reps of something. I don't know. Just another way to play around with it and don't overthink it, as you said. So,
yeah,
final thoughts on strength training? All right,
yep,
everybody. Wait, were you going
yeah.
to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's one of those things where, like you guys have mentioned, just doing a little is just gonna help you. There's no way around it. It's going to make you a better bike rider, no doubt about it.
That was actually one thing I wanted to mention, is there's kind of the newbie gains that you get from lifting. It's not that hard to get those. If you've never lifted before, like as Keegan's doing, all you got to do is just like one or two exercises for 20 minutes, and you will get benefit from that. So even if you can just do that, like, you're going to get benefit. It's totally worth it.
Did you tell us what your second lift was? So Bulgarian split squat and
I do a squat variation called a cyclist squat, on like where I stand on like a wedge board or a plate, and it's kind of on my toes. I
well, you
just
do more. You do more than two lifts. I mean, Keegan, who's only doing two
Oh,
lifts. What was the second one?
gotcha.
I mean, it's like I'll do like a pistol squat with all the weight I have, which is only like,
You can pistol? That's hard.
or okay, maybe I'm saying it wrong. Just like a just a squat, just a freaking
Two legs?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Pistol squat is, or am I
It's a
wrong on this landing?
goblet
Pistol
squat.
squat. Okay,
Yeah,
goblet squat. Pistol's one-legged. So when you were like all my weight, I was like, oh my god, wait a minute. You're actually freakishly strong and you just don't know it.
I should do. Honestly, that would be interesting. But yeah, I'm worried of.
So what about if you did a deadlift move holding the? Do you want to get a little bit like hip and glute action going on that bad boy?
I do a single leg deadlift too. I kind of that's one of my like kind of variations.
Okay.
I always am doing the Bulgarian split squat because, like Lauder said, like that one for whatever reason, if I just make sure that I'm really driving through the heel, I just makes my glutes so strong. And in the past, I've actually tried squatting like in the real gym with real weight, and it just gave me a sensation way different, more of a quad burning. I'd go out the next day and I'd be like, oh my God, like my legs are smashed today from the squat, obviously. But when I do this Bulgarian split squat, like sometimes, yeah, the next day my glute will be sore, but it's fine on the bike. Like it almost feels like I don't know why that would be, but it doesn't affect me. Like if I have a sore glute, I can still do my ride, no problem. But if I have a sore quad, it's like, oof, I'm done. I can't even bike today, really. Just a bit. Probably I'm just doing the squat terribly wrong, honestly. But
I don't know though. I think squats I know they are like one of the lifts. I don't
yeah,
love them. I haven't done them in a while, and I kind of want to get back into them, but I'm almost thinking, do I just mess around with heavier Bulgarian split squats, or now that I have a bar at home where I'm doing some home stuff and I have a landmine set up, so I don't have to worry about balance. It can be just weights, but I'm also trying to check myself and be like, oh, you're doing the weight thing again and like chasing big numbers. So yeah, I'm a little torn, and that was the only reason I need to go to a gym. So now I'm like, I have all the other stuff here.
yeah,
We'll see, guys.
yeah.
Thanks.
And
Oh, go ahead.
I'd imagine that weight, that one lift, is different for everyone. So
Yeah, individual, everybody. Good luck with your training and racing. If you need help with coaching this year, hit us up. Keegan at EVOQ.bike, Landry at EVOQ.bike, Brendan at EVOQ.bike. If you don't want to coach, you want a training plan, check out the store on trainingpeaks.com. Good luck. We'll talk to you soon.